So take a moment to lengthen the spine. Allow the hips to be extremely heavy. Feel the element of earth in your lower body. Sitting bones sink down into the earth like lead. The legs are heavy, the back is relaxed. And the body is completely accepting the support and the nourishment of the earth. And then from the base of the pelvis, begin to lightly ascend up the central line of your spine. Once you arrive at the center of the chest, it becomes more like sky. And feel that the heart space is expansive in all directions. And then when you rise up to the throat, the element of space. Feeling that the crown of the head softly expands into space. Or the visual of a tree. Up by the tree, the branches extend. It's the widest part. And bring all your attention to the center of your chest, to the point just to the right of your physical heart. This is called the spiritual heart. This is where the yogis say the individual soul resides in the human body. And that life force that resides in the body, it's the same consciousness, the same love, the same energy that animates all of creation. So as we chant Om one time, imagine yourself becoming one with everything. Take a deep breath in. Your eyes closed if you prefer. Before I start sharing, I want to acknowledge that there are many, many different paths of yoga, and none is wrong or right. They all end up at the same place. So if anything I'm saying is different to something that you've learned before, I hope it doesn't disturb your mind, and just see if you can integrate the practices in a way that is more supportive for the unfolding of your own heart. So the goal of these practices, the true purpose of yoga is self-realization. And that means realizing who we are beyond these limitations of the body, the mind, the senses. Sometimes when I say that, people say, are we really limited? Because we're taught affirmations, I can do anything. And the true self, that consciousness within us is not. But our senses are limited. Our eyes can only see, the physical eyes can only see certain things. Right? If I took my eyeballs out and put microscopes in instead, then I would have a completely different experience of reality. I would see all these moving shapes. So the eyes can only perceive certain things. The ears can only hear certain sounds. Our sensitivity, according to how long we practiced, before I practiced, I really only felt my body as kind of meat and muscles, and as the practice of meditation has become deeper, I can feel more subtle sensations within my body, but I know this is just the beginning. So because we are perceiving through this, there are limitations, and we tend to perceive life incorrectly, which causes an incredible amount of suffering. So there's a story, I butcher every story that I tell. There's a story about 3 blind men. There's an elephant, and they all have their hands on different areas of the elephant, and they're told to say what it is. And because they all have a different experience according to where they're touching or where they're feeling, they all think that it's something different than it is. So it's important to remember that our senses of perception are limited. We're not seeing what we really are. The purpose of yoga is self-realization, remembering who we are beyond all these limitations. And then the practice of yoga is all the tools and techniques that help us to realize this. So ultimately, when we move along the path, there's a great unfolding of compassion, because as we start to realize who we really are, we can see ourselves in others, not just as an idea, but really seeing that source of life is animating that being and that being and that being. And the exterior part that we see is just nature. This is nature. It's evolving. It's constantly changing. It's impermanent. So the teachings I'm going to share this morning are from the Yoga Sutras. So I study classical yoga mostly. Classical yoga, there are 4 paths of yoga. There's karma yoga, which is the yoga of action, learning to do all of your actions as an offering. Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion. So it can even just be gratitude, can be a practice of bhakti yoga, taking a moment to see the beauty, chanting, any kind of ceremony that you do is bhakti yoga. I think many forms of creativity are bhakti yoga. Painting, dancing. I know when I danced, dancing was bhakti yoga. That's when I felt most connected to my heart and to joy and gratitude. And then jnana yoga is the intellectual path. And this book is the kind of textbook of Raja Yoga, the 8-limbed path of yoga. So in this book, it explains in the first chapter a little bit about what yoga is, some of the qualities of the mind. And then the second chapter is the chapter for practitioners, where it outlines the causes of suffering and then the remedy for the suffering. So this morning I'd like to share the causes of suffering with you because I find it really, really helpful to contemplate them myself. And it's really the knowledge that liberates us. Our suffering is because of a lack of knowledge. Not little k knowledge, not that we don't know enough about math and science and all the things of name and form, but the knowledge of who we really are, what's really happening, how life is really unfolding. Most yoga texts, they give all of the teaching in the first few verses so that if someone who's very close to enlightenment reads it, they can experience the teachings in those first couple of verses. And then those of us who aren't quite there yet, we have to keep reading and do the practices, and over time we get closer and closer. So I'm going to start by sharing the first 4 verses of the sutras. This is a translation by Alistair Shear. I really like this translation of the sutras. And Dharma Mitra recommended this one to me, to all of his students, not just me. And now the teaching on yoga begins. Yoga is the settling of the mind into silence. That's the definition of yoga in this practice. But there are other definitions of yoga. Karma yoga, yoga is skill in action, right? All of these different definitions take you to the same place. So this practice is yoga is the settling of the mind into silence. When the mind has settled, we are established in our essential nature, which is unbounded consciousness. Our essential nature is usually overshadowed by the activity of the mind. So I've especially chosen to share this morning because I know myself and probably many of us, our minds are quite busy right now with this sudden change and all the news and information. Spinning. So how do we move deeper behind the mind? So our essential nature is unbounded consciousness. I'm going to segue through from here to the causes of suffering. And then again, it says when our essential nature, this unbounded consciousness, when the mind slows down, we're able to experience who we are. The causes of suffering, the first cause of suffering is the root cause of the other causes. There's 5 causes of suffering. I wonder if I should have a little marker board and paper. Let me know if you'd like a marker board if I do this again. So the first cause of suffering is called avidya. You don't really have to know the Sanskrit words. It's most important to know what they actually mean, right? So we can get stuck studying all the things and the facts, and then we're kind of in name and form. What does this mean? So this is ignorance, and this is the ignorance that we don't know who we truly are. And because we don't know who we are, we tend to identify with our physical form. So the second cause of suffering is egoism, this idea that we are separate beings. So I can really see this. Most of us identify with our bodies and think that we are our bodies. We think that we're our minds, our thoughts, things that happen to us. But these are just tools for who we really are, that infinite consciousness to perceive through. And Dharma often says that pure consciousness, the text describes the pure consciousness as being of the nature of infinite bliss. So if you're sitting in infinite bliss all the time, and you want to have different experiences, that source is very creative. So it makes us, these beings with different senses of perception. So it can have different experiences according to our senses of perception. So it gets to experience what life is like through these eyes, through these ears, through the filters of this kind of mind. And then through all of creation, what's life like through a squirrel's body, a bird's body, a tree's body, right? So it's just an act of joy, lila, play. Okay? So because we don't know who we really are, we identify with our physical body, we start to think that we're separate. And this causes incredible pain because everything in form is impermanent. So the body, if your happiness comes from your body, as you get older and you start to get these funny lines and you start to grow some gray hairs and the abilities of what your body can do change, then you suffer because the happiness was coming from those external actions instead of being connected to that light that's always watching, that's untouched by the external actions. The next cause of pain and suffering is attachment, raga, and it goes hand in hand with aversion, dvesha. Okay? So this is our desire to really grasp and hold on to the things that we think are making us happy in the external world of form. It's because we don't know who we are, we have to seek, or we choose to seek happiness outside of us. So we're like, maybe I'll be happy if I find this partner, and we're happy for a moment, and then we realize, oh, they're not everything I thought they would be, right? Or something happens to them, or we lose them, we break up. Dharma often says, he's like, oh, students complain all the time of, oh, I lost the boyfriend. Who cares? There's thousands of nice boyfriends, right? But our minds, oh, no, we have to, we're trying to find happiness in these external things, and because nothing in form is permanent, they all end, and that ending causes suffering. And then aversion is our unwillingness to experience certain things. So sometimes an emotion arises that we may have been taught to feel shame or guilt about, or we're not supposed to have it. Maybe some anger arises. And instead of allowing the anger to move through the system in a healthy way, it's said that healthy emotions take 90 seconds to move through the body. But because we're like, oh no, I can't feel this, push it down. And then it stays in the body, and it causes suffering. But if we were able to see correctly, if we weren't seeing through these limited senses, we would see that we are in a constant sea of change. So everything right now, everything in my body is actually changing. It's never the same, not for 1 second. Everything around you is subject to time. It's eroding, it's changing. There's nothing that stays the same for a second. And if you look even more closely at what we are, it's not like there's a factory where you can buy skin and muscles and bones and you put them together and you make a human body. This body, if you keep breaking it down to its smaller parts, you break it down to the cells, eventually break it down to atoms. And the scientists are now finding that atoms break down into infinite specks of light and vibration. And if you choose one of those infinite specks of light and just say, okay, what's that made of? Infinite specks of light and vibration. This is from Dharma Mitra. So this, there's actually infinity within our own human body. We tend to think that there's infinity beyond. It's easier to see beyond because, okay, there's sky and we can tell something keeps going there we can't see. But we're not aware, we think the body's finite, and it's actually infinite. It's vibration and light, right? Constantly changing, constantly moving. And everything around you right now too, the floor is made of atoms, light and vibration, the walls, light and vibration. So this is actually a sea of change. And if we allow everything in this sea of change to be experienced, we receive it, We release it, we receive it, release it without grasping or pushing, just allowing these waves to flow through. Then we alleviate a lot of our suffering. So those two, I remember I did a in-depth course of this when I was at the Shivananda ashram in the Bahamas doing karma yoga. And it was really interesting. I would spend the whole day just walking around contemplating, attachment and aversion from moment to moment, noticing, oh, what's my mind attached to now? What does it want right now? And then noticing beyond that, both of those experiences often require a greater window of time. So if you're really, really present, if you're settled in the present moment, just take a breath right now. Really nice, full, deep breath. And breathe out. And if you're present and experience your breath as it is right now, there's nothing else that we need. So while we're in this time where many of us are isolated, I really do miss my students, but I'm happy that I can talk to this camera a lot. It's nice. But I think it's really important to go out in nature to make sure that we're not spending too much time on the technology, because we can gain a lot just by being present in nature and watching and observing. And nature shows us a lot about who we are. Nature is constantly changing. It's subject to the conditions around it, right? But it just keeps changing form, continuing. And the last cause of suffering outlined here is called the vinivesha. This means fear of death. And the texts say even the wise sages experience it to a point because it's part of living in a human body. So because we don't know for sure what happens when we leave this body, there's a little bit of fear. There's a desire to stay here. Or even if you have a lot of faith and you're curious and excited for the next chapter, there's fear of losing our loved ones, right? There's that attachment in there. So that causes incredible suffering. The yoga texts say that death is 100% safe. And it's actually, there really is no death. It's just changing form. This energy can't be created or destroyed. It changes form and goes on forever. So whatever we're experiencing right now, if it seems like it's a lower chapter, these are beautiful chapters actually to have time to look inside and to root to something that's more supportive, more nurturing, to a deeper inner happiness that will allow us to enjoy life a lot more than all these external things that we've been holding on to. It's actually a really beautiful opportunity. And I shared with some of my students, if you receive Eckhart Tolle's newsletters, he's sent a really beautiful talk about it as well. I'm sure you can find it on YouTube. But this is an opportunity to go inside and to meditate and to really take advantage of this time to be still and be quiet. So many of my friends, when we're in the chaotic chapters of life and talking, and I suggest, meditation, like, I can't meditate, I don't have time. A lot of us have time now, so perhaps meditate. But meditation is, part of it is sitting in stillness, but it also can be, you can walk and meditate, the first stage of meditation is concentration. So if you concentrate on the yoga knowledge as you walk, things can be revealed to you. I'll share one more little story about fear of death. I love this story. It was going around on Facebook, I don't know how many years ago, a handful of years ago, and it was the story, there's two twins inside the mother's womb. And one of the twins was saying to the other one, "There's no life after birth. We have everything that we need here. We are nourished by mother, everything's here." And the other one was like, "I know there's life after birth." Right? And that's just an amazing thing. Right in there, their senses are limited to believe that that's what exists. Right? But we already know there's another life. And when we leave this body, we'll be born into another experience. And Dharma says things get better and better and better and better. So he says we need a certain amount of pain and suffering. Everyone goes through the same amount of pain and suffering until it's enough that it makes us choose to go inward and let go of our attachments and aversions. So we seek inner happiness. But once we seek inner happiness, that's not the end. So once we're connected there, life is infinite. So then we get to experience just for the pure joy of experiencing, right? We see things as they are. We know that nothing is ever really lost. And nothing is actually ours. Everything is this source's. So this physical body, the ego, when it thinks it's separate, it thinks, oh, I'm going to lose my money, or I'm going to lose my this or my body. But it's actually all the sources. And we'll go back and nothing is lost. So I hope this is helpful for you. I hope it gives you something to contemplate. If there are any things you would like me to talk about in further videos or classes you would like me to share, I'm very grateful to be able to do this. I've always not liked technology so much, and right now I'm apologizing to technology and being grateful that we're still able to connect in some way, but also knowing that it's really important to have eye contact with humans, and we can't have that through this means. So when you're out and about, when you see people, make eye contact. Yesterday I talked to quite a few strangers and it's like, hi. It's good for us to have eye contact. And we just had a really nice talk with some strangers. Everyone is very open right now. So see if you can take some time to see the gifts and then really contemplate this yoga philosophy. So I'll just summarize it one last time. The real purpose of yoga is not gymnastics. Although I really enjoy teaching the gymnastics, it's lots of fun and it has a purpose. It helps us to expand our belief of what's possible. But the real purpose of yoga is self-realization. Realizing who we really are beyond all of this. And all the tools of yoga, all the different paths are tools that purify our system, purify the body, purify the mind so that we can realize this. And the 5 causes of suffering, according to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. The first one, avidya, ignorance, not knowing who we really are. The second one, asmita, egoism. Because we don't know who we are, we incorrectly identify these separate bodies. When we know who we really are, we see ourselves in others. Compassion naturally develops. We want to help each other. We want to share. The next ones are raga and dvesha, attachment and aversion. So those things solidify life, make it harder instead of allowing experiences to arise and pass away while you watch, observe in the present moment. Dharma says a lot that the yogi stands supreme in all circumstances. He also recommends remain unconcerned. So whatever is happening, remain unconcerned. Watch, but don't let your mind go too far into the future or the past. Stay present. What can I do now? How can I serve love now? How can I serve love now? Moment to moment to moment to moment. And then the last one is fear of death. So really contemplating, look at nature, look what happens after a tree dies, turns into something else. So watch, look for evidence, and take good care of yourselves. Thank you for being here. Namaste.